So I have my Photoshop open, and I want to create a new image, and it will be our test image. So choose pixels and make this image 10 to 10 pixels with 2 pixels per inch resolution. RGB color is okay. So it's an unusually small image, and when you open in Photoshop, it will look like that, which is not and as you probably understand, and as we mentioned before, pixel size in raster graphics usually measured in pixels per inch. So we are not talking about a pixel like 1/10 of millimeter in size, but we're talking about how many pixels can fit into particular measured distance, and usually it's pixels per inch. So what we set for this image is 2 pixels per inch. So basically, our image should be 5 inches in size. But when we open this image in Photoshop, it is actually quite small. And the reason for that, because Photoshop actually presents pixels as screen pixels. Because developers of Photoshop, they know that actual size of the pixel usually doesn't matter that much. The most important thing to see, like the overall visual impression which is created by the image. So, but if we want to see actual size, in the view menu, we can choose actual size, and then we see it's as we want, and 1 pixel is almost, it's not exactly half inch, but at least it's close. It's not exactly, because Photoshop actually doesn't know the exact pixel size of your screen. That's why it's not exact size. Okay, and now when we have our 10 to 10 square, let's create some elements on it. I will create just vertical lines of different color, making like 1 pixel spaces between these lines, like this. Oops, sorry. Yeah, something like that. And I can add one more. And then let's think about what we usually do with our raster images. For example, like operations which, if we are not just drawing on them as we created lines, right? What, for example, Eric did during his tutorials. For example, we transformed our raster images, right? So to transform an image, we select it, and then we apply some transformation, some operation, right? So what kind of operations we can apply? For example, we can rotate an image. We can rotate an image like that, for example, right? And then we will apply this operation. See what happened. So our image, it was crisp graphics. We had white areas, colored areas. Now, after our rotation, immediately our image started to get blurry, and elements like this image is not that crisp anymore, right? And it is just after one transformation. Let's look at other transformations which we usually apply. Just a moment. We very often, like quite often, we will change image size. it can be for various reasons. For example, you are composing your image from different images in different sources. Images are coming in different resolution, and you need to put them and adjust their size. So then you will resize your image. And there are, I'm not sure if Eric mentioned that, there are, like, when you're resizing your image, there are two ways to resize your image. One is called resizing, the other one is called resampling. So resizing, it is when you change just pixel size. For example, if I uncheck resample here, then this dialog will do resizing. If I check, it will do resampling. So I'll check it for now, and we will try to change size of our picture. So now our picture is 5 inches in size. So, and we want it to be, say, 10 inches. Nothing has changed, because actually what changed only our pixel size. If we go to view and again choose actual size, then we will see that actually our pixels increased in size. So it's when you can, what it means. And now each pixel is 1 inch big. So my first question to you, what do you think will happen if we print this image? Will our printer normally print this image? Will we see it as 10 to 10, no, kind of, right, with lines? And will the lines be actually 1 inch in width? What do you think? I do not see.
I would guess it would.
Yes, yeah. Yes, absolutely. So it's absolutely normal, despite it's such a strange and unusual image with 1 inch wide, like big pixels. Yes, it will be normally printed, and there is nothing, in general, there is nothing really unusual about this image. So that's how we changed pixel size. And if you have an image which you want to print on your printer, and you use scale to fit function, then basically that's what your printer does. So your computer doesn't resize the image before printing. It just says, computer just gives instructions to the printer to resize the image during printing, and printing driver will do the resampling for you. Basically, no, I'm slightly incorrect here. Sorry, forget about it. I won't go in this direction now. Okay. So another option is resampling. What happens during resampling? During resampling, we are trying to decrease number of pixels in our image or increase it. So when we would like to decrease number of pixels, when it's a very large image. When it's a very large image, then probably our computer doesn't have enough processing power to deal with it. It's possible. And I've seen half gig images in Photoshop created by students, and it is absolutely not a way to go. So you should always think what actual image size you need. So what will happen if now we resample our image? For example, we want more or less normal resolution. We want, I wouldn't go, if we go to 72 pixels per inch, right? So what will happen? Let's try. Yeah, that's, and we want it to look like, uh, we will want it to look like 100%. Yeah, then it will look, so as our image, so, and Photoshop did it fine. Because it was an increase in resolution, our image has sharp edges. Photoshop detected it and it helped us. So, but if we, for example, decrease the resolution, and Photoshop will need to present, just a moment, it's 10 inches. Yeah, so we have 10 pixels and we want to go to 9 pixels. So we want to go to 9 pixels, and we will choose automatic resampling. You see, it's all blurred uh, because Photoshop needed, so some, and yeah, and our image is distorted. If we can try different methods of resampling and decreasing number of pixels. And we will find that all of them will decrease the quality a little bit or not a little bit. And the best method we can choose for this particular picture is nearest neighbor. And this method will give us, just a moment, sorry, I didn't change size. And what it will do, it will actually just drop completely one column of pixels. So each method we chose actually distorted the quality of our image a little bit when we went down with downsampling. When we increased, the quality was preserved just because our image was geometrical. So what does it mean for us? It means that almost all transformations in raster graphics decrease the quality of our image. Can you think about transformations which won't decrease the quality? Like what transformation I can do which won't decrease the quality of my image? For example, 90 degrees rotation. 90 degrees rotation will always preserve the quality. Or what's called, I'm not sure if it's, yeah, what's called flip horizontal, flip vertical. It also will preserve, just a moment, it should be flip vertical, flip horizontal, just a moment. Yeah, flip horizontal. So it also will preserve the quality. Any other transformation will cause resampling. And what resampling actually is, it is, just a moment, Word, just 1 second, I need to open a link. Oh, no, it's not. Mhm. Okay, and what actually is happening during the sampling? For example, this is our current image, and this is our current image, and this is kind of how we want to decrease number of pixels. Here, it's like squares of 4 pixels are going into, they will be transformed in 1 pixel. And what Photoshop does, it somehow should take this area which matches the target area and somehow calculate an average to calculate the color of the resulting pixel. And colors, that's what we see, what we've seen. So image will be blurred, colors will be we will create gradients between what we had before and what between different pixels. So they will become less sharp, and they will go like through the range of colors which was presented in the original. So, and if you rotate, it's almost this, just then the source and the target will be not will be also angled between each other. So they will be rotated, and then the calculation is even more complex, and the picture is even more uneven and aged. So what we did now was just an exercise in very small detail, and it's something like distortion and raster images, very easy to demonstrate in such small, when we're dealing with such small image, because actually small details, they are affected the most. And it is something to remember. It's inevitable in raster graphics. But what you should remember about that any transformation you apply to an image, a little bit, at least a little bit, decreases the quality of the image. And you should be very conscious about number of transformations you apply. Next time, probably I will demonstrate how it applies to real images, not to test images. And then we will understand like what parts of realistic images and geometrical images are affected the most by transformations. If you have any questions. No. Okay, so Eric, it's all yours.
Okay, thanks, Leo. Yeah, that's an important lesson because as much as possible, you don't want to transform too many times. Otherwise, you're kind of creating approximations of your pixels. So as much as possible, if you're going to scale down. And because if you scale up, Photoshop is basically going to create pixels to approximate what the original image is. Okay. So today I feel like we'll get halfway through, but we could do a part 2 for next week and just go a little bit slowly today. Okay, so we're going to, do you see my screen? Perfect. Yeah, we're going to render an image. So what I have here are a few different images of people, trees, background, and my exterior rendering that I want to highlight. Notice that we have just one project file and a bunch of different layers for each of the content. And instead of doing file open and selecting your files from the folder one by one, they'll create their own project files, which you'll have to actually copy and bring into one project file to work all together. So instead, you could head to File, Scripts, and it'll be Load Files into Stacks. And it will have a similar dialog where you go into your folder, select all the images that you'd like, but instead it'll compile into this nice little project file with separate layers. Okay, so as mentioned in the previous tutorials, our layers are order dependent. So I'd like to place my background image at the bottom of my layers panel so that everything on top is visible. So I simply click, drag, and wherever the blue lines are showing is where the layer will slot. And now I can see my people have become visible. My exterior rendering should probably go around on top of the background and everything else is nicely on top. Now I will work alone with the exterior rendering. So with the eyes next to the layers, I can simply click to toggle its visibility or click and drag for numerous layers. Okay, this is my exterior rendering. This is actually a project I did in first year, so don't be too harsh. Yeah, there are some things that I don't want included, like this massing and the plane. So we have 3 different types of tools. We could create a selection. We have our marquee, our lasso, and our wand. I'm going to ask you guys what you think would be an appropriate tool to use. Which one should we try out?
Which part are you trying to remove?
Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, which part are you trying to remove?
We're going to remove this massing and the plane over here. So they're all pretty flat colors, same tonal
I
range.
usually use the magic select and just tweak the continuity or the
tolerance.
tolerance.
Yeah, so we'll try the magic wand, and so what that does, it selects a pixel that we click on as a reference, and selects all the pixels that are of similar color and tonal range. I have my tolerance at 60, so that means that there's a range of 60 above and below that pixel we select. So if we were to make it 0, for example, let me deselect first by Control D or Command D, change that to 0. There's a very little tolerance, so that means all those pixels that were selected are congruent with each other, but we want to have a larger range. So let's choose something like 60 and select that. What I can do is I can toggle the add to selection button here so that I can continue clicking different pixels to add to what was currently selected. So that's about what I want. And I could delete it by erasing, or I could simply press delete, but I want to make layer masks so that instead I could play with the transparencies, and so no information of this actual image is lost. So how to do that? First, I want to right click. There's something that should come up. Select inverse. And what that does is now everything that's not the building itself will be masked. So I could go to this button, select layer mask, and now my building is masked. There are still some undesirables like these shadows and these straggling lines. So what's another tool that we could use to get rid of this? Let's continue with our selection panel. Pardon?
Thinking the lasso, or where you can actually mark out geometries.
Yeah. Let's do the lasso tool. And my favorite is the polygonal lasso tool because it creates straight line segments. So we can just simply click around for our borders. Enter if you're not close to the end to create a selection. And because I have my add selection option at the top, I can continue to create more boxes, just like that. So I'll do this really quickly. Enter quick. Enter. Now, we're in our layer mask, which means that we could use our black and whites to adjust the opacity and transparency. And we could do that with our brush tool. So if I have black, that means I'm going to increase the transparency, versus white means if I'm painting over white, I will increase the opacity. So simply paint over top to remove or make more transparent. And if I were to press this arrow button or press X as the hotkey, I can bring back some of that information. So that's useful if you're ever make an edit but want to revert it. You can do that with white. Okay. Control D to deselect, and I have my building, which looks fine. The design is questionable, but it looks fine in Photoshop. I'll bring back my background image by toggling the eye, and simply by using the move tool or hotkey V, I'll move around my exterior rendering and situate it wherever I feel fit. It's a bit small, so what's the hotkey for transforming an item? Does anyone know? It's Control T. So I just have to ensure that my layer is selected, and if I hit Control T, I can adjust the size of the image through the grips. So I'll make it a little bit bigger. And you know what? It could be cropped. That's fine. This image will be cropped a little bit. Okay. There are a few things with my background image that I'm not pleased with. There are some patches on the grass that look a little bit distracting to the overall composition. So does anyone know what kind of tool we could use to mask this in the sense? We have two options, I'd say, are the best bet. We can use our clone stamp, which essentially copies a part of that image or reference a part of an image and then copies over top where we want it to be painted. Or we could use our spot healing brushes. Healing brush and patch tool. Those are all pretty useful. And so with our healing brush, we could paint over top, and I'll use surrounding pixels to mask over anything that we find desirable. But instead, I have to click my background image in order to do the change. So simply paint over top, and it should get the nice grassy bits over where it's a little bit muddy looking. And I have a few more further in the background. If that's the case where it's not really picking up the surrounding pixels, we can switch by right-clicking on the icon and go to our patch tool. So now we can make a selection over here by clicking and drawing, and now dragging to another place in our image that would be a better fit. So that looks like it could replace that item. Control D to deselect, and I think that looks pretty okay. I don't know about you guys, but it's fine for now. Okay, our building is a little bit weird on top of the image. Like, it looks like it's been cut out and placed on top. So we might need to make a little bit of shadow so it adds more to the realism. Okay, and that could simply be done with our brush tool. So we could brush a little bit of shadow underneath to make it more realistic. But every time I use something like a brush tool or a color or shape, I prefer to use a new layer. In that way, you could edit just those brush strokes or the color without destroying or damaging the image that you brought in from your file. So let's create a new layer through this icon next to the trash can. Double click to change the title. So I'll call this shadow. And we want it below the exterior rendering layer. So that could apply. I can right click and choose different options for the size of my brush and the hardness. So the hardness just determines how defined of an edge that you get. So you can have a defined circle or have something more of a softer gradient. And I want a little bit soft, so I'll do something like 40. I'll have my black as the base color and make sure that you're in shadow. So what I'm doing is I'm just holding shift while I'm making my clicks so that it creates straight line segments, and this is awful. I will redo that. Let's just do one and another this way. Okay, I'm not a fan of this little thing that's hanging over, so I could erase a bit of that. Simply type E for the shortcut to eraser tool, or it's right here on the toolbar. Switch back to the brush using B, and we can adjust our opacity, fills, and overlays. So what overlay does, it creates sort of an effect over top the layer below. So right now it's normal, so it's not going to really have an effect over the image below. But if we did something like, where's one that's cool? Soft light. There you'll see that it's a lot less black, so it's a lot less harsh on the image. It's more transparent, so we can see some of the grass below, and that kind of looks more realistic. So I'll stick with that. And now I could adjust my opacity, so I could bring it lower to make it less intense. And maybe, you know, that's a little better than having just the image placed on top. And if you want, we could create a layer mask on this little brush layer, add layer mask, and again, adjust our, how much is shown through our black and white to adjust transparency. So I could use black and brush over this part to make it a little less showing. Something like that. Okay. Right, moving forward, we can now deal with our ancillary items like the trees and the people. So instead of clicking on the layer and having to move one by one, instead I'll go to my move tool here at the top and choose auto select and ensure that your layer is the one that's in the drop down menu, so that anything that you click in the workspace, the Photoshop will recognize which layer it is and have you able to edit it quickly. So I can also click this show transform controls, so I'll have that checked, and any item that I have selected will automatically have the transform controls surrounding it. So now I could adjust their size, enter to accept the transformation. I'll click this guy. He could be sort of like the foreground, so I'll have him somewhere here. Accept by entering. We'll have this lady near the front, so she should be a bit smaller. And feel free to adjust your scene however you find according. And she could be walking up the ramp. So we'll have to do some more editing on her to make it look like she's behind this ramp instead of in front. And lastly, I'll move my tree to somewhere around here. Drag for those controls. And when you're in this mode with the transformation box around the image, you can right click to do even further transformations, such as skew, where you can grip, you know, the corners to distort the image even more. We can do that. It's a crooked tree. All right, I'll uncheck my show transform controls, and that should deselect that function. Okay, I'll have my tree behind my exterior rendering. So remember, we click and drag, and it should be below our layer that has the exterior rendering. Okay. So this is, oh my God, they're a bit too small. So make sure you don't have to rescale it up, because that's when you start to lose the quality of your image. Okay, this tree is a little bit bright. So we'll focus now on the adjustment layers, where we could play around with the levels of your shadows and highlights, play around with color and the tonal ranges. So this is a little bit bright. I can select my brightness contrast adjustment layer, and this will show up as its own layer. The thing about adjustment layers is that they will affect anything that's below it. So my brightness and contrast is going to affect my tree layer, my shadow layer, and my background images. And my people are going to be unaffected. So if I turn those down, you'll see that they're somehow in spotlight in the scene, even though it's a dim evening. So instead, I want to clip it just to the individual layer. So what I can do is either right click, create clipping mask, and that will attach this adjustment layer to the layer below. I'll undo. And the other way is to hold Alt or Option on Mac and hover between the layers, and that will offer you the option to click and attach this adjustment layer to this tree. So that looks a little bit better in my properties, or sorry, this thing's in the way. Have your adjustment layer selected and go to properties so that you could adjust that tree brightness. Something like that's fine. And for your own exercise, you might want to do all the people as well, because they don't look like they're in the scene. They look like they're on top. Right click and select one of the people, and we could do another type of adjustment layer. So I could choose levels. Again, we'll attach this levels adjustment layer to the person layer by holding Alt and clicking in between the two layers. And now we have this dialog that lets us play with the different shadows and highlights. So if you squish this, this grip and this grip, you're creating more contrast because there's a smaller range for your tones. So if you don't want too much contrast, you might want to keep it at its extents and simply drag the middle grip. So this looks a little bit better. Selecting the eyeball or the eye next to the layer will toggle if it's visible or not. So that's what it looks like before, and this what it looks like after, and that's a little bit better, I'd say. Okay, so later on, just continue with your exercise with the different people to adjust how they look in the scene. We'll move forward to, I guess, composing what our image will look like. So we could go to the crop tool. That is hotkey C. So we'll drag our grips to frame what we want to see when we export this image or when we save this image. It's a little bit better, and you can see that I have my my exterior rendering cutting out. So these images, when I click enter, and if I were to select that layer with the exterior rendering, select my move tool, it will be cut. So make sure if you're cropping that if you want to keep all the information from that layer, don't have it cropped out. Otherwise, it'll be cut off. Okay, what else can we do? I'm not too much of a fan of this background here with the trees because it's sort of blending into our exterior rendering, and I like these trees better. So what tool can we use to copy this part of the image over to this part of the image? As in, it's not a rhetorical question. I'm asking you guys. Well, we have a few options. We have the healing brushes. We have our clone stamp. What else? We can select this part of the background and copy it over into another layer. But what do you think? What do you guys think is the most expedient procedure? Okay, I'll answer my own question by saying maybe the clone stamp is the best route. So we can go to our background image, and by holding Alt, we will refer to this portion of our trees that we could reference. And then when we unselect it, we have a paintbrush that allows us to paint over our background and copying that part of the image. So that's a really ugly clone stamp, so I'll fix it a bit more. This all like requires adjustments, so it's like painting. You gotta have those layers, you know. And when you encounter problems like this where your extent of your image is shown as a hard line, you could go to your, say, spot healing brush, and that should most likely even it out or not.
And you
So
can kind of reduce you can reduce the opacity of it too if you're wanting to sort of overlay a bit of a pattern over another area too, right? Like more of a texture.
Yeah, exactly. So let's undo some of these steps, and we could do a different opacity for our clone stamp. Different opacity. Flow just reduces how quickly the layers of that that paintbrush will apply on top. So again, I'll reference my image here. That's a little bit better. That's a little bit better. Okay. Yeah, so you'll take time to do this. I'm giving myself like 30 seconds, but it'll look nicer if you take a lot of care and time into how that will look. And again, we could go to a spot healing brush to sort of adjust those hard lines in the sky. Oops. Okay, well, I'm just gonna do a few more. I'm like not satisfied. Are you guys satisfied? I don't think so. Okay, voila, there is our copying, or yeah, clone stamping of the background, which I feel like shows a little more contrast here, at least with the black, maybe not so much the ramp. But it is what it is. I want to adjust this building as well because I'm not happy with the tone of it. So again, we'll go to our adjustment layers panel. I'll show you what curves looks like. It's a bit more intricate. And so you could play around with this line by dragging and moving it to different quadrants of this histogram. And so this one's a lot of very slight tweaking, which may not be the best when you're doing a large item like this, but play around with all these adjustment layers because you'll start to realize what it's best used for. Okay, I don't know. A little bit less contrasty, but you could add another adjustment layer, say like this. Again, clip it, and this should clip to both of these. And I could adjust my contrast a little bit better. We'll see. We'll head back to this lady, which we neglected for a bit. And in order to have her appear like she's on the ramp, we'll have to cut her legs off. What's the best way to do this, you think? What procedure can we do?
Using the polygon lasso tool?
So we could use the polygon lasso tool or any of the lasso tools to create a selection where her legs are and outline where the ramp is. So I've made my selection, and now I want to probably erase or mask her. I would suggest masking because then you could adjust her if you need to move her to another spot. So we'll right click and select inverse so that everything in this area that I have my cursor over will be masked and this will be hidden. Here we go. Okay, now we've got that much of our scene. What else can we do? We could add shadows. So to the people at least. So we can right click on this person, and it's good to have them all named so that you don't have to deal with layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 and not know what is what. We can make a copy by right clicking and selecting duplicate layer. Okay, and what you'll notice here when I did that is my adjustment layer above was unclipped or unattached. So I'll have to reattach it. We could Control T to access the transform controls and like adjust what her shadow would look like, and further with the right click option to skew, etc. How she looks on the ground type of thing. And most likely won't want to keep her as a dark shadow. So what are a few ways that we can turn this item completely black? Does anyone want to take a guess? With anesthesia? I don't know what that comment is referring to, but okay. What we can do is we can select this content and paint bucket it so it's just a flat color. An easy way to do this is simply pressing Control and clicking on the thumbnail of the layer that you want, and it should make a selection over the whole or whatever content is available on the layer. So if I were to deselect and choose people 3, hold Control and click on the thumbnail, my soccer guy over here is going to be completely selected, which is such a useful useful trick. So we'll go back to person 4, name them Shadow. Shadow. Okay, and we'll either press G to head to our paint bucket and gradient tool, and you'll have to right click the icon to select paint bucket if that's not the default. And black, perfect. We can, oh, okay, I see why. Instead, nope, let's do a different command. Let's go to brush and just paint over her. So there, now she's completely a shadow. Or we can, instead of doing that, I know this other command. So if you type Control U, it'll bring up this dialog, which you, the only way to revert it is through undoing. So I don't suggest it unless you know that you aren't going to make any changes after, you could change the lightness to black or white. I don't know if you want white shadows or black shadows, red shadows. And click OK to apply the changes. Now, there's our shadow. Again, we could do a few other options like we did with the shadow for the building. So head to our overlay options and let's just select overlay and see what that looks like when we adjust our opacities. Okay, looks a little weird. We might want to use some of these tools to have it look like it's on the grass. So smudge tool might work. And in these cases, the smudge tool, dodge, burn, sponge, sharpen, blur. It's all up to you to decide how it looks. Like you don't know what you'll get until you start playing around with it. So I'll zoom in, make it a little blurrier by slightly clicking over top like I'm painting. That looks a little more integrated. So we'll zoom out by typing Control-0 to adjust to the extents of this artboard. And I'll say she could be a little lighter, just like that. Okay,